Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tulsa World Opinion podcast for the week. And I'm Jenny Graham, the editorials editor.
Bob Doucette, editorial writer and columnist.
And we're just going to jump right in. It's heavy topics, but Oklahoma this morning, I heard us on all the national news. Oklahoma became the state with the strictest abortion laws. A law that's being sent to Governor Stitt would ban abortion at fertilization, if I recall. Is that right, Bob?
That's correct.
So
on fertilization.
That means like everything. Like you don't even know you're pregnant, and now you're banned from doing anything. So I've gotten a lot of people who are upset about it because I think that this has been sort of, obviously the culture war issue of 50 years, but I just don't know if lawmakers have thought through the effects of this. I mean, it sounds good. It makes for a great reelection campaign in this state that's very red. But when you think about that, what it really means, I'm not sure that they have. And I know that I've got some ideas and I've done some research of things I want to write about in the future, because this does put us back, and this is more than just a soundbite. And one of the things that was brought up, and it has been, and you wrote a good piece for this weekend that I've been telling people to read. It has to do with the idea of the pro-life movement only being pro-life through birth. There's not a big movement for things that come afterwards, because that's the hard part of being a parent and living. So you address that and tell a little bit about what you're writing about this weekend.
So last Sunday, the governor went on Fox News Sunday to just talk about whatever is going on. And obviously the biggest issue of the day was the running up to that episode was the leak of the Supreme Court draft on Roe and how it looks like they're going to overturn it. And the interviewer, which Fox is friendly ground for the governor and for other Republicans and whatnot, any kind of conservatives. But the interviewer was pretty straight up and everything about asking the kinds of questions about, well, hey, we've got this going on. What about this? What about people that are, become pregnant through something like rape or incest? What about what happens to these people who may not be ready for motherhood financially, emotionally, whatever, after they have to give birth here and things like that? And just to sum it up, the governor's answers basically illustrated what you were talking about with the pro-life movement. This is a very singular movement. Stop abortion, no more abortion, and it's become more absolutist as the years have gone by leading up to now. We can see that through our legislation. But the thing that's being brought up that has mostly been cast off by folks in the pro-life movement is what happens afterwards. What are you going to do? How are our children faring in Oklahoma and some of these other states where abortion is being made illegal? And, it sounds like all we get is a lot of words.
We don't, to be very blunt and clear, Oklahoma's children are not faring well.
No.
We are 42nd nationally in well-being, and well-being includes everything from access to healthcare. We have the highest instances of what they call adverse childhood reactions among our youth, that they experience more things, whether, they add up, divorce, parent in prison, abuse, neglect, hunger, poverty. We track high in all these. We have a foster care system that's, went to court for many years under a class action lawsuit that they're now, working through trying to improve the foster care. And that's after they've been taken out of their homes. So when you talk about foster care, that's after the abuse and neglect and parents have lost their rights. So we have, and I think somewhere between 7,500 to 9,500. I mean, it fluctuates, but I mean, at least 7,500 kids right now are in foster care, many of them needing homes. And I'll be honest that some have trauma, and that means mental health care. And we have a mental health care crisis in our youth. We have Healthy Minds that just a few months ago called our youth suicide rate right now an epidemic. My high school, where my kids go, the principal told us that there was an 80% increase in the suicide ideation being seen in their schools. And that means kid comes to school and they have to call COPES and other people in because a kid is that much in crisis. So if we talk about just abortion and not all these other things, then that does nothing.
It's very incomplete. Yeah, it's not, you're not thinking through the whole issue here, because
think through the effects of what we're doing. And of course, you know, the other argument is, oh, so just kill the kid. That's not what we're saying.
No.
And there are disagreements on when viability happens. I don't think it happens at fertilization. I mean, to be very honest about it, for me, again, board has not spoken about this as an issue, but to recognize that there are not differences of opinion there and to find common ground there, because this is swinging. So the pendulum on this is swinging so far in our state that I just don't think, the middle's being ignored to try to come up with some common sense things and not just an ideological, I'm going to get reelected and ignore the consequences of this, because the people who may be having kids are going to be ones who may be poor, and they've been victims of abuse. I mean, there are no exceptions for rape or incest. So
I mean, they may be 13 or 14 years old.
Yes, and we do have kids that young getting pregnant. So I think you point out in this column that basically there is a weakness in that argument that pro-life movement has put forth, which is, you know, what happens afterwards?
Yeah, their only answer, commonly anyway, is adoption. And
I mean, we have adoption available, and it's not.
And that's yeah. I mean, there's a lot of kids. Yeah, there's a lot of kids in foster care right now. And if people are just dead set on having, you know, a baby, and they want to go through an adoption agency, that ain't easy, and it is not cheap.
Yeah, access.
So you're going to have a lot of people. Yeah, there's some people that might be willing to actually step up in that kind of a situation, but if you're telling them it's 25 grand, no, that's not happening. That's not one of those things you put on installment or something like that. You don't have a baby mortgage. They want that money, and this is the thing that troubles me about it. As if you take this from the typical pro-life person's standpoint, this is something they need to think about, because this very much goes into the overall ethic of, we care about children, we care about babies. Stuff happens after they leave the maternity ward. Life goes on.
That's where it gets.
What?
And the programs have to go beyond just, we're going to keep that, we'll help the mom and baby for 6 months or a year, because there are some programs out there that they'll do that. Yeah. What happens 5 years later, 10 years later? Because some of these issues, they linger. I mean, you go into, you know, some of these, you know, the delinquency court, and these are children who have been born into situations that were pretty dire. And now they're acting out. You know, there was a judge who one time said, we have a lot of sympathy for the kid who's abused and neglected, but then we lose sympathy for that kid 5 years later when they're, you know, delinquent and acting out and have behavior issues and they're teenagers. Then we want to lock them up. So, you know, this is a whole continuum of a life that you have to think about that we're not addressing in this state. So if you're going to talk about pro-life, let's also talk about these social supports, which also includes, by the way, investing in public education, which we discussed quite a bit on our show here.
Yeah.
You know, one of the interesting things that happened in the legislature this week, it surprised me that the legislature basically took power away from Governor Stitt to distribute ARPA funds. And, the history of that was that, the early ARPA funds were distributed by Governor Stitt. The legislature got upset that they were largely left out of that. And there were some problems with some of those ARPA funds. Like, I think that was where we bought PPE that never arrived, and hydrochloroquine, whatever that is, that we didn't need. And so they came up with this joint committee with working groups that would take applications, vet them, have public hearings, go through this whole process, and then they would make recommendations to the governor, who could then, approve it or not. And that happened last year. So since last summer, there've been that whole process, in the legislative side, the joint committee approved $160 million worth of projects. Yeah. And that's everything from, nursing shortage to, health, and it's all over the place. Anyway, Governor Stitt's only approved 2 of those projects. And so they're frustrated. They're either frustrated by the lack of movement, which that's what they're saying on the record, which is, we want to be on track. We want to get this going, want to get money to people, or they're worried about where the money's going to go when they're out of session.
Yep.
Maybe both. But the legislature, with 2/3 majority, said they were going to be in special session. And then they moved all the ARPA funds, but about $500,000, into a special account. And the process will work similar to a regular appropriation. They go, you have a Senate bill or a House bill that moves that through, and they are still using the joint committee for the vetting process. So, it was surprising, but of course not unusual. The Republicans sort of dancing around the reasons why they made such a bold move, because it is, they're all in the same party. Now the Democrats are coming out swinging, but
they are.
That's to be expected. That's politics. But, you read through that. I'm going to throw it to you. I was kind of surprised that sort of move was made.
I think at the best, and just it echoes a little bit about what you said, at best, what this means is that the legislature, the legislative leaders are concerned about the ability of the governor's office to carry this project through. That's at best. At worst, they're afraid of, oh my gosh, we're going to have another hydroxychloroquine PPE from the sky, Swadleys, $500,000 going for TVs and gaming centers and stuff like that. At worst, they're thinking there's some, I'm trying.
Well, that was the Emily Virgin. Emily Virgin, the minority leader, sort of alluded to that. She brought up that, we had.
I'm trying to choose my words carefully because I don't want to sound too judgmental, but at worst, It sounds like maybe they just don't know what they're doing. And that's kind of what the Democratic leaders are saying in the legislature is, these guys don't have a clue, so we need to do this. Either way, it's not a good look. Now, on the bright side, it is good that someone's finally doing something. You're talking about almost $2 billion worth of stuff that we can use to improve our state. It's just not being, hardly anything's been done with it. So we need to get moving on that. I think the legislature sees that. How or what is, I am really interested in what is being said within the Republican caucus behind closed doors as to why they decided to do this and do it now. This is a sensitive time to do this, if you think about it, because we're
right. And during an election year. That's what surprised me, that it shows a rift or disagreement, at a minimum, tension maybe, among the Republican leadership during a time of a re-election campaign.
The primaries are just a few weeks away, and the general is just a few months away, and the last thing you're looking for is bad headlines, especially when it comes to how you're dealing with taxpayer funds.
I will say
as if we've had enough of those lately.
Yeah. Well, the process, and I was going to say, for me, it seems to be a good process, though there is some fight on the front end. The legislature is not letting go or letting people know what all the projects are, because there were something like 1,400 projects who applied or that applied for funding, and it was for something like 17, some ridiculous money. And some journalists and some, watchdog groups wanted to see what those were, particularly from the health department, because the health department has been a hot mess for the last couple of years. We've gone through what, 3 or 4 we have a pandemic center that never really got off the ground. And so there were people wanting to see if some of that money is being asked for the pandemic center and for other things, health department, and the legislature has denied those records. So there's a little bit of a fight on that end, which I would say open it up. Let us know who's wanting what. Yeah. But once it gets into that process, though, the fact that we do have a lot of eyes on it, and we are having, public hearings similar to, a process, although our budgeting process in the state's still pretty secret, but it's a little better. I mean, I think anytime we have openness and more eyes on something, the better, because some of those big ticket items that Emily Virgin mentioned that we've written about, it's because we didn't have enough people involved. I mean, the school supply thing where we had to give back $3 million. Now we're under federal investigation because of the way that was distributed. I mean, that was under the governor's gear program that Ryan Walters was overseeing. So, maybe if we had had more of a committee involved in that, it would have prevented it. So, in the end, this is important work. It's a lot of money, and it has the potential to make a big impact. The governor's official statement said he just wanted to see projects that were generational and not pet projects. I would agree with that. They need to, we don't need, like I say, the pet projects, satisfied ego and kind of move forward. So,
and we don't need a bridge to nowhere just to make a contractor happy.
We need some mental health counselors. We need nurses. We need people in the healthcare system and the education system. The pandemic sort of devastated those areas. So let's sort of shore that up. And
we've got at least one area of success with that kind of money, with what they're wanting to do with broadband access.
That's true. And that was in there. So now this morning, I saw the legislature approve since they made this move, the first thing they approved was for nurses. So 21 colleges and tech centers and universities are getting money to expand their nursing programs, which is exactly the kind of thing we're doing. So if we can kind of move along in that, we'll be all right. But what's not all right? Baby formula.
No. Everyone's mad about the baby formula.
I can tell you, having had 2 kids and one that needed specialized formula, it's bad. And you took the lead on this because you got into the trade issue. Whenever we have something like this, you want to place blame. It's Biden's fault. It's, Trump's fault. It's, who knows? But it's not. It's never one answer, is it? I mean, it's always some sort of blend of things. I thought your take on it was interesting, and you sort of led that editorial for us. Explain the trade, the trade aspect of this, of what what happened.
Our trade policies right now concerning that particular industry are very much set up to favor domestic manufacturers. So what that means, what that looks like is, especially under the new trade agreement that replaced NAFTA, the US, Mexico, Canada agreement, there are some prohibitive hurdles for exporters to enter our market to go through. I mean, there's a 17.5% tariff on baby formula product imports. In addition to that, and this was a wild one, and I can't really convey this really well in writing, but I'm going to put this out there. Canada, our northern neighbor, which can send us baby formula by truck or train at any given notice, the hurdle they have to go through to be able to do this without getting a giant surcharge, the equivalent of about $3 a kilogram or something like that, which is basically would be a good sized jar of formula, is they cannot exceed a certain threshold of all of their exports globally. And if they do that, boom, up goes the surcharge. So that basically, between that, our health standards, product safety standards and stuff like that, has made it to where something like 2% of all of our baby formula that is sold in this country is foreign. So 98% is made here in the United States. And one of the companies who makes up 43% of the baby formula market had a place, their factory in Michigan had to get shut down because they had some problems. Some kids were getting sick. Two kids died.
Yes.
And when they inspect the place, they're seeing multiple places where it's not safe. There's contamination issues. They're finding bacteria, and it takes time to do that. Couple that with all of the supply chain issues that we're having that are still being messed around by all this post-pandemic stuff. And there you have it. You've got empty shelves in some place. Throw in a little bit of panic buying in certain markets, and it makes it even worse.
I kind of wonder if there is that, because if there's already a shortage and you go in and they've got a new shipment in, you're going to be tempted to buy
a lot. So
I'm sure stores are putting, limits, but still there is that. And it really shows the delicate system we have. That needed to be shut down. I mean, you have, 2 deaths, it should be shut down, and there's, of course, there's, quarterbacking. Well, they should have had plans for this or done this. You could always go back and say, what if?
Well, the immediate need is you had to shut it down.
Right. I mean, but even then it's like, okay, well, how fast can you make these other changes to make up that difference?
And it takes time.
Right. And so it's been sad, but it shows the delicate system we have and what we don't have. And as a mom, I am tired of the stories of just breastfeed, because that is it's not easy. It's not always feasible. And I'm tired of that. I was tired of it when my kids were babies, and you get the pressure, especially when you're a working mom. And so, all those groups, I'm just saying, stop judging, let moms do what moms need to do. So,
I think most of the people that are making those arrangements are biologically incapable of breastfeeding.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. That's to be the primary way of feeding a kid. Yeah, and
in other words, I'm saying, who's saying that? Dudes are saying that. Dudes.
Yeah, well, women are saying that too. I've had
really.
Oh yeah, after I gave birth, the first person I saw was a person who wanted to, which is great. I'm fine, if you want to do it, but for a lot of women, it is not feasible, or we can't do it full time or whatever. So so just sort of,
come on, people, stand up for your sisters.
We're just feeding our kids. Okay. Feed your kids how you need to feed your kids.
Yeah.
But my kid is graduating. See, it's been 18 years since I've had to deal with this, but so we're having like a graduation issue for the opinion section almost. So we have 2 op-eds from the valedictorian of Will Rogers College High School. And she's fascinating. She gave her a short speech in English and Spanish. And she is the first in her family to go to college. And she graduated high school with 64 college credit hours. So she is going to be, outstanding. And we have an op-ed from her, which is basically her speech. And then the KIP school, the charter school, the Tulsa KIP school, they have their first graduating class. And so the valedictorian writes about what it's like to be the first graduating class and the first valedictorian. So that's cool coming up. And then we also have TCC President Lee Goodson writing a letter to the TCC class of 2022. And I didn't realize that class, because it's typically a 2-year program for an associate's, the pandemic hit 2 years ago. So they've spent their first 2 years of college, earning their associate's degree while dealing with all these pandemic related issues.
Can't even imagine.
I know. I didn't even think about that. And I wrote a story about a family from TCC. There were 10 kids, 9 of whom, one just graduated high school, but of the other 9, they've all attended TCC, and several of them went on. And so they grew up in poverty, and they saw education as a way out. And so it was sort of just sort of an inspiring story of how we can find different paths to improve ourselves. So it's one of those things. And I'm writing a little bit, if I can get it done, about what it's like to see my son graduate, because even though my experience being a parent is like millions of others, all of us feel sort of this unique experience. I mean, my son is a typical kid, but man, when you think 18 years and I mean, he's in this cap and gown and I have pulled him to the finish line. He is a laid back kid who works at his own pace. And then you know, they're all just so different, but there's lots of advice going out to graduates. So Bob Doucette, you're speaking to graduates. What's your advice to a high school graduate?
My advice to high school graduate, enjoy that moment. Your work is just getting started, but that's the coolest part, is once you get past that, the whole world is opening up to you. Also, on your graduation day, do not do what I did. That is screwing around with friends basically all day, showing up at the house with, you know, not a lot of time to get ready and, you know, spend time with your parents and all that stuff before you actually go to the graduation, because you will make your parents mad if you do that.
Yes, we've had the discussion. My son and I have had the discussion of the expectations of this weekend, but my high school graduation was, I remember we had a, you know, family party afterwards and all of that, but there are, my advice, of course, I give lots of advice my son and kids ignore, but for other people who might listen to me, I would say show up for stuff, like for your life. You're an adult, whether it's class, whether it's your job, show up. Don't blow stuff off, or at least be in contact. If you have to miss a class, contact your professor. If you have to miss work, contact your boss. But there are so many people who just don't show up. And then the other advice, call your mother, call your dad, whoever raised you, call them, because there is something about, you spend this whole, you know, 2 decades or whatever raising a kid, and then they just sort of leave. And you're like, that's it? What happened? You know? So it's an adjustment. And, you know, just let me know what you're doing. Just make a call, text.
Yeah.
Hard as a text. Make something. So
and make that a lifelong habit.
Yes, exactly. You know, this weekend we've had this week, and it's ramping up this weekend. In addition to all the graduations going on, we have the PGA happening. It's a big deal. There's a lot of, I'm not a golfer, but I appreciate that we have the PGA here. I don't appreciate the traffic that I'm experiencing because I live around that area. But, you know, you talked about last week, where people should go in Tulsa, that kind of thing. And we have an op-ed this weekend from an architect, Whit Todd, and he writes an interesting piece about what our buildings in the city mean. So when you go into a city, and he's not talking about just the beauty of architecture, which we certainly have. He's talking about things like, we have invested in really nice buildings and facilities at the day center, which are for homeless people. We invested in quality of life things like the Gathering Place, the Bob Dylan Center that we have, and what these mean to a city, that we're philanthropic, that we have the social social concerns. We have, and I thought that was interesting. And I thought it tied in a little bit with what you were talking about. Where do we take people? And did you have anyone since last week say, hey, here's where something that was unusual that you didn't think of about where to take people?
Gosh, I don't know, unusual, but I had some really good suggestions. You know, people had talked about the botanical gardens, the Sherwin Museum of Jewish Art.
That's a good. They have a really good Holocaust exhibit museum there.
Yeah, and they had some. I had somebody email me specifically about that, saying, you know, we got that type of recognition that, you know, most museums just don't get a type of accreditation or something like that. So that's a place I need to go see myself. A lot of people were talking about Route 66 kind of things. And
Oh,
you
the
know, a lot
Mother
of,
Road. I didn't even
yeah,
think
the
about the
Mother
Mother
Road.
Road Market being a place
And of
to
course,
see.
praying hands
That was what I said. I said
and
the
all the fun
people,
stories that go with that.
whether they're, I don't know whether they're true or not, but
You
people
know,
who've never seen it, they're like, that, I've never seen that.
it really is a real thing. They're huge. So really cool ideas like that. You know, somebody suggested the Art Deco tour downtown, the underground tunnels to do that little tour and that kind of stuff. You know, it's people gave me a lot of really cool suggestions that would be neat. And, you know, some of those are stuff you got to pay for, some of them are free. But all of them were really good. I think what's neat about that is everyone has their own kind of view of the town and how they would like to show it off to a newcomer and stuff like that. I know some of mine, or at least one of mine, was a little odd, very specific to a certain type of person.
Yours included climbing up a hill.
Yeah, running
This
up
is already been
Standpipe
published.
Hill.
It's climbing up the hill at, remind me of what, at the
Standpipe Hill.
Standpipe
So
Hill.
it's-
But not to drive. I mean, I want to tell people you can drive to it. You don't have to be like Bob and start at the bottom
But
and
you
like
can't
hike
you
up.
can't get the view without at least walking to the
But
top
you,
of the
yes,
hill.
you can walk, but you're like an extreme sport guy. You're like, why would you drive 10 miles when you can just jog it? No, you can drive it. You can do that. So I'm just telling people you can drive up to a certain distance to get close to Standpipe Hill, but it is a very good view. I mean, it is one of those that, and
Yeah, it's cool.
as you mentioned, it also is not far from the Black Wall Street
Yeah, it's all right there
area,
in
so you
Greenwood.
can tie those in together and really get a good sense of
Yep.
that history. So I always take people down to that area, to Black Wall Street, to
Yeah.
Greenwood, and then we go into the Arts District because it's, you know, it's accessible, it's easy, and it has a lot of history, and a lot of people are interested in that too. So
Vernon AME Church is like, if you have to make it quick and you can't like spend a lot of time looking around or, you know, going into the different type of buildings, you go to Vernon AME Church. They got the big sign that's at the corner there. You read both sides of that. It really encapsulates all of that. And it is cool because you can do a quick walking tour, you know, just find yourself a place to park, go walk up Greenwood through the businesses and the buildings that are right by the ballpark, visit Vernon AME, check it out. And there's that pathway of hope that goes behind
that
the
is
ballpark.
cool. I finally went through that because you walk on
Yeah.
the backside of the drillers, and
Yeah,
some really good photographs and history. I mean,
it's cool. And then that connects you to Reconciliation Park, which I have thought about as sort of our version of the Oklahoma City National Memorial. It's not as big or anything like that, but it is a moving place. It's a beautiful space. And as you do the self-guided walk and everything like that, and read about, you know, a deeper history of Greenwood, it's a cool thing. And, you know, it's free. You could spend maybe an hour doing that, and then just enjoy the rest of your time downtown. But you can learn a lot about pretty crucial history point in our city.
Well, it's going to be a nice weekend. It'll be a little rainy Saturday, so graduations are being moved inside probably, but it's going to be nice. And check out those places, and we will be back next week. Any last words, Bob?
If you're hoping to hang out on River Parks this weekend on Sunday, think again, because a big chunk of it's going to be for Ironman. So that's another thing we got going on this weekend. Is Ironman.
We are moving into a season where you'll randomly find parts of the city like shut down in the mornings because, oh, there's this run or that run or this. So,
well, yeah, I mean, after Ironman, we got like two or three more weeks, and then it's Tulsa Tough.
Exactly. So those are cool events. Just be aware. There's a lot of detours. So, all right.
Cheer the people on too. They need it, man. That's 2 miles of swimming and like 114 or 117 miles of biking, and then they got to run a marathon. They need your encouragement. Go cheer them on.
Where I don't need to ride 160 miles on a bike. I got a car. You know.
And think how long it takes you to drive.
I know. So why would I do it on a bike?
Miles on
It's like, why would, I mean, you know, I'm just saying it's a different mentality than what I have at the moment. Maybe one day I'll grow into that mentality.
Like, why climb Mount Everest? Because it's there. That's the mentality.
Exactly. You know what? You can fly over it, I think. I don't know. You can still get, you know.
You can't fly over it. True.
All right. Well, till next week. We'll see everybody then. Thank
See
you.
ya.